Welcome everyone to NorthStar Community online and in-person service. It's so good to be here. Last week we were at the regular service, so hopefully you caught that. And so again, I always make the assumption if you are listening to me or here, you are in some form of recovery. For some of us, we're maybe even in that pre-recovery mode where we know things are wrong, but we're not ready to stop yet, but at least we're starting to think about it. So welcome if that's you. Others, we're somewhere on our journey. We're getting there. We're able to not participate so deeply into our hurts, habits, and hang-ups, but it's a struggle, but we're getting there. And then for some of us, we've been at this a while, and we're even catching some glimpses of rich, full, meaningful life. And then, of course, some of the others were really down the road, and we've been doing this for a long time, and we know we have to continue to do the right things, and maybe our struggle is not quite as hard as it was, but we know about our need to stay on the recovery path. So I was, we're still in January, so I'm going to kind of see this as our 2022, a new year of opportunity, and kind of look at how can we look at ways that create a purpose for our lives that makes sense. And I'm going to throw in two large words here for us that keeps us from doing that. One is anhedonia, and the other is alexithymia. So we got two big words that start with the letter A. They're important for us to know about recovery. So a reminder for us, even though I realize we're now into mid-January, actually later mid-January, but not that far from Christmas, to not forget about just the messages we've had for Christmas is that Jesus came to dwell among us, that God is here working in our lives, He's here, God is love, and then Jesus as our liberator, as our Savior, that He came here to liberate us from all of our shame and our hurts and all those things, and we can overcome our past, and we can overcome the trauma and the PTSDs in our lives and the abandonment, and we can do that. And because it's so important for us, because in recovery, one of the things we carry with us too much is shame. We carry so much shame with us, and I just, we need to understand what shame does. Shame is such an integral part of our addiction. For many of us, we carry grief and confusion and resentments towards ourselves and towards others, and we are just really good in recovery finding ways to beat ourselves up and to really loathe who we are and what we do and don't do and all these things, and so it's important for us to understand some of the things that we do that keep us from really understanding what a rich, full, meaningful life looks like. And one of the things that we talked about on Friday a little bit was that we have to understand that we do a lot of things that keep us safe. And what that means is that we kind of set a bar for here on on where we want to get to, but really we could be up here, but we just don't believe in ourselves enough. And it's so much safer to be mediocre. It's so much safer to loathe ourselves than it is to move forward. It's painful, but it's safe. And so what we're trying to say is it's okay for us to create a purpose in our life. It's okay for us to see a better life. It's okay for us to find ways to move forward. And again, that's why I think it's important to understand about Jesus came to this world. He came here as our liberator. God loves us so much. And if we can remember that, we can move on and we can let go of some of the things that we think about ourselves. I always love this saying. I found this, I grew up in Little Red Cloud, Nebraska, and this was on the church bulletin in 1981. But I have kept this. I love this saying, and it just captures God so many ways. So I'm going to read it to you. What if God's ordering of the universe was dependent on the goodness and justice of man? It would be a world of chaos and disorder. But God's pattern is not, if you are just, I will be just. No, God's pattern is one of goodness and justice for all, good and evil, just and unjust, prior to any human response. And the ultimately astounding thing about God is this. God calls us to love our enemies and pray for our persecutors, because this is what God does. Such love is God's perfection. That's a beautiful saying. What I want you to catch here is, and the ultimately astounding thing about God is this: God calls us to love our enemies and pray for our persecutors. So I want to change the meaning of that just for a second for us to understand when we are in our addictive modes, we are our own persecutors. We don't love ourselves. And so I want you to hear God loves us. We don't have to be perfect. God's perfect. We're not. We never will be. If any of you think you need to be perfect, you're in for a long life. But when we loathe ourselves and we hate ourselves in our before pre-recovery, it's hard for us not to think perfection's important because we don't think anybody will love us if we're not. So I read this. This is Philippians 4. This is Paul writing, and he's talking about gratitude here. He goes, actually, I don't have a sense of needing anything personally. I've learned by now to be quite content whatever my circumstances. I'm just as happy with little as with much as with little. I found the recipe for being happy, whether full or hungry, hands full or hands empty. Whatever I have, wherever I am, I can make it through anything in the one who makes me who I am. That's pretty good. So Paul's saying, we got to get content with who we are, where we're at, and then maybe figure out ways to move forward. So when we talk about purpose, I always find it, I always give the NorthStar group our time about this, is that we really struggle with this one in many ways. It's just hard for us to think about having a purpose because for many of us, we spent a long time in survival mode. So to think about not being in survival mode is a little bit tough. But if you think about it, what do you love to do? What brings you a state of happiness? Now, again, I want to make sure, I don't want you to hear that I'm talking about professional. So I'm not saying that you need to find your purpose professionally, but I will tell you that if you're not in a job that really kind of helps fit a lot of your gifts, it's pretty tough. And certainly God's more important in your job, family's more important in your job, people are more important in your job. But if you're really unhappy in your job, it's going to create lots of problems in your life. And you really do need to find at least a job that you can be somewhat satisfied in. I'm sure I've told the story before, but I remember I was about 5 years out of college, and I was working in a mental health center at the time, and I ran into one of my classmates who was a lawyer then, so he was new, but he was a lawyer. And I said, well, what's it like? How do you like being a lawyer? And he goes, I hate being a lawyer. It's the worst thing ever. God, I hate this. But he says, but this only thing I can figure out to do is going to make me a lot of money. And I was thinking, I don't know what he's doing today. I don't know if he ended up being a lawyer or not. I mean, staying with it. But I don't know about you, but 40, 50 years of doing something you hate, that's a long time. I hope he grew to like it is what I hope really happened. But what are your knowledge? What's your skills? What's your abilities? What can you do to help maybe other people? What can you do that will reduce your own anxieties and morbid expectations and help you come to find things that you really like? And the problem is for us in recovery, for many of us, we were so traumatized and abandoned as children. Trauma and abandonment robs us of our purpose because all we got left to do was survive. So again, I always tell people, I said, I'm going to really, really simplify this, but divide your brain in two. So you got this side of your brain is survival, get through, make it to tomorrow. This side is rich, full, meaningful life, happiness, joy, connection. Now, which one do you think your brain's going to choose on a regular basis? It's going to choose survival. It makes sense. We want to be alive tomorrow. Well, the fact, though, is for a lot of us, we're not in survival mode anymore. We don't need to, but our brains and our body can't figure this out. One of the biggest problems we have with us that have been traumatized as kids, we walk around with our cortisol levels too high. So we should be here. This is where our cortisol level should be, but for a lot of us, we're way up here. And so again, if I'm a gazelle out on the great, whatever the African, whatever that place is called, and I'm just, grazing away, and all of a sudden I see a lion over there, I have a reason for my cortisol to jump up. But I don't need it all the time. And it's exhausting for us to live with cortisol that high. And what does it do? It makes us anxious. It makes us agitated. It makes it more difficult to connect with people. One of the symptoms, if you ever want to know if your cortisol is too high, is what do you do when you're in a room and people start coming into the room, particularly maybe little wild kids? Do you start feeling agitated? Do you start feeling tense? Do you start thinking all sorts of stuff? That means your cortisol levels are too high. Your brain doesn't understand that these people aren't attacking you. They're not trying to get you. It's loud. It's different. It's people. And all of a sudden you find yourself agitated. And you know, you have to understand with PTSD, to me, if you ask me to boil down, what is the number one symptom of PTSD, if you have it, is you're agitated too much and it destroys relationships. So, I don't know about you, but that's not a good way to live. And the other thing is I talk about the ACE score, the Adverse Childhood Experiences score, and again, a lot of people, I've never had an addict say to me, when I've said, where were you traumatized? I've never had an addict say to me, I don't know what you're talking about. Everyone's got a story. And we all have stories of trauma and abandonment in our lives. But for a lot of us, we've had a lot of trauma. Again, when the NorthStar community people that come, vast majority of us have scored at least a 6 out of 10 on that. So here's what you got to remember. The higher the score, the higher the suffering. And so that's what recovery is about, is letting us stand down. We're not going to be attacked today. There's a pretty good chance of it. If you're in a situation where you have to worry about being attacked today, you need to get out of there, because that's not okay. But for most of us that I see, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to be attacked today. But we live like we're going to be, right? Like I always like to kid some of the soldiers I work with, and they always tell me about how they know all the escape routes, and they're going to sit with their back to the door and all this stuff. And I go, that makes sense when you're in combat, but I don't think you got to worry about that in the grocery store in Mechanicsville right now. They don't think that's as funny as I do, but hey. But the point is, for us in recovery, we're working so hard to control the dialogue of our lives. We're so busy hiding. We're so busy not letting other people really get to know us. We're so busy trying to control, and what we're really doing is we're trying to control our safety and not being hurt again. And so what do? It's hard to live with purpose when you're living with survival all the time. When you're living with anger and resentment and bitterness, and you're living with too much substances in your body, or you're spending too much time on the computer, or you're in your 33rd broken relationship this month, right? And we just continue to live our lives addicted and trying to control our lives and trying to do all these things. And when really the easier thing to do is turn our life and will over to God and do that. But man, is that easier said than done. So I think one of the ways that we can really come to hear God in our lives is to live with gratitude. We live with gratitude, that maybe we can start seeing that we're not so bad. And if we can start seeing we're not so bad, maybe we can start creating a purpose in our life to find something, right? Because we really only got 2 choices for us that have been through trauma and abandonment, is we can live with bitterness, and we can live with survival, and we can talk about how bad our lives were, or we can try to recover and move forward. Because here's the one thing I know, and you all know too, we can't turn the clock back. I can't undo anybody's life, neither can you. So we only got one choice, is to move forward. You know, that's why the AA and the 12-step thinking is so important. Basically, this is why I way oversimplified 12 steps. Recognize our stuff, turn to God, make amends, find gratitude, and live a purpose. That's really what it's about. But when we're in survival mode, we're never going to do that. And you know, it's sad that when we give up a rich, full, meaningful life, when we exchange that for security, we're never going to get what we want. I can't remember his first name, but Gibbons, who wrote The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. I do this because this is about how many books it is, right? It's huge volumes. He went through and did this big story. This was back in 1860s, I think. English guy went through and looked at everything about it. Just really a fascinating study of the Roman Empire. And then what he said at the end was, he said, what was the cause, what was the ultimate cause of the fall of the Roman Empire? There was a lot of reasons. But he said the number one reason was that the Roman citizens chose security over liberty. And that's when the Roman Empire collapsed. And that's what we do when we're addicted. We're choosing security. It's crazy, some of the ways we do it, when we drink and we use and we go out and find other people doing all the same stuff we are. But we're surviving, and we get that. That's our security to us. We understand that. And to say to someone, you need to have a purpose in your life. You need to stop using the stuff quit doing the things you're doing. Remember, we break addiction into substances, compulsive behaviors, and relationships or people. When we get to that step one, we go, oh my gosh, you're right. The stuff I put all my faith in actually was destroying me. And now I understand I am powerless, and it's unmanageable, and I can't control this anymore, so I got to let God do it. Well, there's a greater power than me, and it's God, and God can do this. But when we're pre-step one, the thought of living again and not surviving and not living with this crazy security thing, but living with liberty is so hard. And I hope for you out there that are listening that are struggling with letting go and stopping what you're doing, just remember that the way God works is he puts people in your path to help you. But you got to let them. You got to give yourself permission to do that. And then you really do just have to do one day at a time. Like I always tell people when I first got into the recovery world, one day at a time, one day at a time, I get it. And I thought it was very cliche. But now, that's how you have to do it. It is truly one day at a time. That is how you recover. I remember one time we were in NorthStar, and it was kind of a weird night that we had several veterans in there. When I say veterans, they had a lot of years of recovery in them. And this new person came in, and he was there because his wife was there, and he made his big proclamations. He was never, ever going to use drugs again in his life. He was never going to drink again in his life, and he was never going to hurt his wife again. And I saw the veteran just go, because they all knew. Anytime you start saying that, you might make a week or two. It truly is one day at a time. And so when we talk about purpose, it's a deep desire. Think of a deep desire to express yourself in healthy ways. I believe that God has created a deep desire in our souls to express ourselves that can actually bring us joy. Now, I'm not naive here. We're not always going to have joy in our life. But for some of us that are living addictively, we don't have any joy in our lives. For people who are recovered, who were at that point, will tell you, a lot of people say, I know what hell is because I was there. My whole life was built around substances. My whole life was about using. That's all I cared about. So we're saying we can go from there to actually having a purpose and finding something in our lives that's important to us, that gives us joy, that God created in us a reason to do. So think about for a moment, think for a moment about when was the time you experienced a real purpose, that you felt like, I am where I belong. I'm doing what I need to do. How did you know it was your purpose? Well, I think, now we don't want to live our lives on feelings only, but think of your feelings as road signs out there. If you're going down this road and you're feeling pretty good about what you're doing, you're not waking up Sunday evening or Sunday morning with dread in your heart because tomorrow's Monday and I got to go to work and I'm miserable and everybody at work's terrible and it's blah, blah, blah. Or I'm just depressed and I have nothing in my life, blah, blah, blah. Your feelings are telling you something. You're not heading the right direction. I state the obvious here. But the other side of it is, if you aren't doing some things that's meaningful to you, and you're connecting with people and family, and you're going down the road and you feel pretty safe, and you're going with traffic, and you're feeling good about yourself, that's a sign too. You're probably doing some right things. It's easy though for us to because of the trauma base, there's this thing I always like to talk about. Do you feel like you have agency in your life, right? So what does that mean? Agency means that you have a realistic belief that I do have control in how my life is working. Can't do anything about accidents. The ones that, we're victims of, not the ones we were dumb, because a lot of our accidents are because we're being dumb. But, we can't do anything about weather. We can't do anything about, COVID closures, things like that. But do you believe that you actually have what you do has control on how your life is? That means you have agency. If you don't feel like you have agency, you believe that you're a victim to everything. Whatever happens, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to roll with the punches and get along and survive, right? So that's kind of the two big continuums. And of course, we go down that way sometime and this way some of the time. But at the end of the day, to have purpose, you have to believe you have agency, which means you have talent, you have skills, you have abilities that can lead you to a purpose of some sort. And I'm going to throw out the word reciprocity because I don't think you can do this by yourself. And so reciprocity is the knowledge that you are loved and that you are held in others' minds and hearts. That when you're not with them, they will still think fondly of you, and vice versa. So reciprocity is, if you're married, you give and take with your spouse. If you know what they like, so you like to meet their needs, and you hope they'll meet your needs. That's reciprocity. When we are in our addictive mode, we have no idea what reciprocity is. We are too busy worrying about how our loathing of ourselves, the trauma base, all that stuff. So we tend not to know what reciprocity is. So agency and reciprocity are very important for us to understand how to have purpose. And just in case you don't believe me about how you can't live your life by yourself and so you can't be your own man and no one's going to tell me what to do, blah, blah, blah. 11 of the 12 steps start with the word we, just so you know that. So how do we get to purpose? We have to face our pain. We have to understand how our past is affecting us today. We figure out ways to reduce our living in protection and self-loathing and increasing our time with loving ourselves and loving others and trusting God cares about us. Living with less protection and more in faith. Those are all things we do. You can't do that without reciprocity and agency. And the other reason for us to create purpose in our lives, it will help reduce our anxiety and our depression, because it's kind of hard to feel good about your life when you wake up either doing what you hate or you wake up with nothing. When we have something to do, purpose to do things, we have less anxiety. We have reasons to move forward in our lives. We can live with gratitude. We can see faith. We can see God working in our plans. So we've talked about addictive thinking, and the biggest thing about addictive thinking is that it's about deception, right? When we're addicted, we're very deceptive. And we always think about, we lie to other people, those kind of things. But the reality is we lie to ourselves most of the time. And that's what we have to understand. And when we lie to ourselves, it's not lying. It is lying about our use usually. But the other part is we're lying to ourselves about how bad we are, because we're not that bad. We truly aren't. But we've come to believe that. We're angry. We have our porcupine index. We got it stuck out here so nobody can get close to us because everybody's going to hurt us. Everybody's going to harm us and blah, blah, blah. It's not true. But that's because how we feel about us. Then, of course, our morbid expectations. If I come up to you and say, man, 2022 is going to be an awesome year, and we go, what? How can it be possible? Every other year hadn't been good. Why will this be? You see what I'm saying? We just developed this world of thinking, and our expectations are so low. So I'm challenging you. It's early in 2022. I'm not telling you to set resolutions. I'm telling you to think about what is your purpose, or what would your purpose, what would you like it to be? What do you love to do? What are you passionate about? What comes easy to you? And this one's a little bit tricky because I know people, because of our self-loathing, that's quite talented and some stuff comes very easy to them, But what they do is because they loathe themselves so much, they just think, well, if it's easy, anybody can do it. And the fact is, some people are pretty amazing what they can do. What gives you delight? What takes away your anxiety? What makes you feel better about you? And what's stopping you from finding this purpose? What are you avoiding? What are those things that's because you're avoiding is causing frustration in you? How are you judging yourself for not having this purpose? What do you wish you were doing, but you're not? Those are hints to us about what we can do. So our feelings are important. They tell us where we're headed. Finding our purpose will give us happiness, delight, fun, satisfaction. Doesn't that sound pretty good? The opposite of living without a purpose is we're not going to be happy. We're going to be miserable. So think of yourself as a GPS system. Are you headed toward your purpose? Are you living your purpose? Or do you need to reroute and do something else? For many of us, we don't trust ourselves. We don't value ourselves enough to think about what it would be like or give us permission to be okay with being successful, whatever that means. So I've talked about this before, but the movie Ad Astra, I recommend it everybody to watch. I know it's science fiction, and it's not the most exciting science fiction movie you ever watch, but if you watch it from the perspective of Brad Pitt's character, who is the main character, watching him living in a very separate, traumatized, abused life as an adult because of his childhood, to him getting it at the end about what was important. So he's an astronaut. So, long story short, his dad is a famous pioneer in travel, and then he kind of disappears, and he's out to find it. He's in charge of finding it. So they ask him, there's a computerized or digitalized psychologist that they go over, and he has a report in every day about where he's at emotionally, see if he's still okay to do missions and stuff. So this is how he ends the movie when he's talking to the digital psychologist. And I think he just captures what a rich, full, meaningful life is. I am steady and calm. I sleep well, and I have no bad dreams. I am active and engaged. I am aware of my surroundings and those that are in my immediate sphere. I am attentive. I'm sure of the future, but I'm not concerned. I am focused on the essentials and at the exclusion of all else. I will rely on those closest to me, and I will share their dreams and burdens as they share mine, which is a great definition for agency and reciprocity. I will live and I will love. Isn't that pretty good? Pretty good description. I added in, I have a purpose in my life that's bigger than me. Gratitude is the most important hands-on tool for my rich, full, meaningful life. God is truly among us. Jesus, through his grace, is my Lord and liberator. So I'm going to close today with one of the great scriptures from Philippians that Paul writes to remind us how we really need to live as opposed to how most of us live. Celebrate God all day, every day. Revel in him. Make it as clear as you can to all you meet that you're on their side, working with them and not against them. Help them see that the master is about to arrive. He could show up any minute. Don't fret or worry. Instead of worrying, pray. Let petitions and praises shape your worries into prayers, letting God know your concerns. Before you know it, a sense of God's wholeness, everything coming together for good, will come and settle you down. It's wonderful what happens when Christ displaces worry at the center of your life. That's pretty good. Now, if I could just do it, right? If I could just get that, don't fret or worry, instead pray. If I get that, life would be good. Sometimes I do it. It's hard. We're so used to all the dysfunctional way of living. But let's give ourselves permission today to find some purpose in our life, find some meaning in our life, and trust that fret and worry less and pray more. See how it works for us. So real quick, we meet on If you're here locally, we meet on Friday evenings at 6:30 up here in front of the church now instead of behind the church. On Wednesdays, we meet at 6:30 as well in the same location. Also, we have Sunday mornings at 9:30 for anybody who can come for Sunday school. We're a small group there, and then, of course, we have our 11:15. So we got a lot of opportunities for you. We also have an AA meeting that meets here on Sunday evenings at 6 o'clock as well. So we have a lot of recovery stuff going here, and I invite all of you to come. If you're not online, I encourage you to find support groups out there. You cannot do this alone. If you're here local or long ways away, as I know, I always tell people I can count 11 states of people in 11 states that listen to this. You can call me at any time. My office number is 804-746-5081. You can also email me at csimpson@wgva.church. So love to hear from you, and it's great to have all of you here today. Technicians, as always, appreciate you guys so much. We always close our support meeting with a prayer of serenity, so let's go ahead and do that again today. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace. Taking, as Jesus did, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. Again, thank you for joining us, and have a great week.